They wait for karma like it's a storm on the horizon, something far away, something loud, dramatic, divine, but what they don't understand, what they refuse to see, is that karma isn't coming, it's already here. It doesn't knock, it slips in through the cracks, it lives in their choices, it echoes in their silence, no lightning, no thunder, just a slow unraveling, one missed call at a time, one closed door. One sleepless night, not as punishment but as a mirror held up to the soul. You see, karma doesn't chase people, it waits, because eventually every lie collapses under its own weight. Every betrayal returns, not in fury, but in form. Familiar, inevitable, quiet. This isn't about revenge, this is about gravity, and gravity doesn't forget. The silence of consequence, they think silence means freedom. That just because the world hasn't risen against them, just because lightning hasn't struck their doorstep, they've escaped the fallout of what they've done, but they misunderstand the nature of consequence. It doesn't scream, it doesn't chase, it waits, it whispers. It plants itself like a seed, slowly blooming in the soil of their own actions. And while they smile, thinking they've gotten away with everything, real karma is already doing its work. Not in loud explosions, but in subtle shifts. Relationships grow colder, opportunities become scarce. There's a change in how people look at them, nothing overt, just a flicker of doubt, of distance. The energy begins to shift, and they can't quite explain why things don't feel the same anymore. That's consequence. It doesn't wear a mask or wave a flag. It doesn't seek attention. It settles in like dust in a room that hasn't been visited in a while. You don't notice it at first, but eventually it's everywhere. In the corners of their lives, in the gaps of their laughter, in the growing spaces between them and the people they once leaned on. See, true karma doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't announce its arrival. It just is, because every action a person takes writes a line into the story they live tomorrow. And when those actions are rooted in harm, in selfishness, in betrayal, the story turns dark, one word at a time. But slowly, so slowly that even they don't realize the story is shifting until it's too late to rewrite it. By the time they see the consequences, they're no longer in control of the narrative. Life is no longer responding to their lies, it's reflecting them. People begin to treat them not as they pretend to be, but as they truly are. That's not punishment, that's not revenge. That's the universe responding in its most natural way. Balance. They say time heals all wounds, but they forget. Time also reveals all truth. And while they carry on, believing they've buried their wrongdoings under smiles and distractions, time is unearthing every one of them, slowly, deliberately, quietly. There is no need for spectacle, because real justice is never theatrical. It's patient, and it unfolds in the silence, in the missed opportunities, in the slow realization that the warmth they once felt in a room is gone, that the trust they took for granted has evaporated, that the people they dismissed no longer look back. They are surrounded by the very emptiness they created, and that emptiness speaks volumes. Sometimes the loudest punishment is the silence of being forgotten, of becoming irrelevant in the lives they once believed revolved around them. And that's the true price they pay, not in fire or fury, but in absence, in disconnection, in no longer mattering, because karma doesn't come like a storm. It arrives like a shadow. It grows behind them unnoticed until it's all they see. It fills the spaces where real connection used to live. It silences the rooms where they once held power. It is not loud because it doesn't need to be. Their own life begins to echo with the emptiness they carved into others, and no one has to lift a finger, no one has to shout. The consequence simply becomes part of the air they breathe. There is no warning siren, no announcement, just a slow erosion of their world, and they will search for someone to blame. They will say others changed, that people turned against them, but in truth, the world is simply holding up a mirror. And what they see now, what haunts them, is not what was done to them, but what they've done. That is karma, that is consequence, and it doesn't knock, it doesn't call ahead. It walks in through the same door they left open when they chose to hurt someone and pretend it didn't matter. The irony, most of them won't recognize it, not at first, because they expected karma to come dressed as punishment, not as reflection. They thought it would be someone else doing to them what they did to others. But karma isn't petty, it's poetic. It doesn't retaliate, it rewrites. It rearranges their life in such a way that even they can no longer deny what they've become. It takes away, not all at once, but piece by piece. A friend who no longer answers, a job that slips away, a sense of peace they can't recover, nights that no longer offer rest, days that feel hollow, no matter how much they achieve, and they'll call it bad luck. Unfair treatment, misfortune, but deep down in the quietest part of their mind they know. They remember, and it burns. That's why karma doesn't need volume. It doesn't need rage. The truth alone is enough. The weight of their own actions, when carried long enough, becomes heavier than any punishment others could devise. And that's the masterpiece of it all, because those who were wronged don't have to retaliate, don't have to fight or explain or defend. They just have to walk away. And in that silence, in that dignified distance, karma begins its silent work. The absence becomes the lesson. The quiet becomes the sentence. And the ones who thought they'd won begin to feel something creeping in regret, confusion, and invisible resistance. They try to move forward, but the world no longer responds the way it used to, because what you send into the world doesn't vanish. It roots, and one day it grows back toward you. So when they laugh too loudly, brag too boldly, and live too carelessly, don't be fooled. The silence around them is not peace. It's the echo of consequences arriving. It is not karma preparing to strike. It is karma already here, unpacking its bags. The mirror that doesn't lie there's a moment, often late at night, when everything goes still, the noise fades, the distractions run out, and they're left alone with their own reflection. And that's when the real weight begins to settle in, because the mirror doesn't lie. It doesn't care about appearances. It doesn't flatter. It simply reflects. No filters, no excuses, just truth. And that truth, if they've built their life on deception, manipulation, or betrayal, can be unbearable. They can smile for the world, play the role, fool everyone in the room, but not the mirror, not themselves, because deep down, every single person knows exactly what they've done. They know the line they crossed, the face they broke, the loyalty they spit on, and no amount of validation or performance can drown out the voice in the back of their mind that says, "You did this, not someone else, not fate, not bad luck. You," and that's where karma lives, not outside, but within, not as punishment, but as presence. It sits behind the eyes of the person staring back, reminding them that no matter how far they run, the truth always keeps pace. They try to cover it, of course, with busyness, with attention, with noise. They surround themselves with people who tell them what they want to hear. They chase applause to avoid hearing the silence. But it's there always, that whisper in the mirror, that quiet confrontation, and it becomes louder the moment the world quiets down, when the show ends, when the crowd leaves, when they're brushing their teeth or lying in bed with the lights off. The truth stares back with unblinking eyes, and it doesn't scream, it just waits, because it knows that eventually, no matter how much someone hides, they have to face themselves. That's where karma begins, not with others getting revenge, not with a dramatic fall, but with the quiet, gnawing discomfort of a person who can no longer look in the mirror without flinching. And the irony, the very people they hurt, the ones they lied to, used, or cast aside, those people have often already moved on, found peace, let go, but the mirror doesn't forget. It's not concerned with justice for others, it's a reckoning with the self. And that reckoning is unavoidable, because a person can't outrun their own soul. They can't buy silence from their conscience. They can't decorate the truth in enough success or distraction to make it disappear. In the end, the weight they carry isn't what others did to them. It's what they did to others, and the realization that the world may forgive, time may forget, but the mirror never does. That's why some people seem to have everything and still look empty. Because the mirror has shown them what they've become, and now they're just trying to outrun the image. But it's impossible. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you know about yourself. And when you've looked into the mirror and realized that you were the villain in someone's story, not by accident but by choice, something shifts, the air becomes heavier, smiles become thinner, achievements start to feel hollow. Because behind the applause is a truth that won't go away, that they caused harm, and now they have to live with the version of themselves that did it. It's subtle at first, a pause, a glance away, a sudden discomfort when asked a simple question. But it grows, the mirror grows louder, because truth ignored is truth magnified, and the more they try to bury it, the more it rises. That's the soul's way of restoring balance. That's karma's way of correcting the story. And this has nothing to do with cosmic punishment. It has everything to do with emotional accountability, with inner alignment. When your actions and your values no longer match, the internal conflict becomes unbearable. And no one else may see it, but the mirror always does. That's why people start to unravel, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. The guilt metastasizes, the shame becomes louder than any praise, and eventually no stage is bright enough to hide the shadow trailing behind them. They think karma comes when the world catches up to them, but the truth is, it begins the moment they catch up to themselves. When the lies stop working, when the blame doesn't stick, when they finally stop pointing fingers and start seeing their own reflection clearly, that's when karma arrives, not as vengeance but as clarity. And clarity is a painful kind of justice, because it doesn't scream at them, it doesn't accuse, it simply reveals, and once you've seen yourself clearly, you can't go back. You can't pretend you didn't know better. You can't fake innocence when your own soul knows the truth. This is why the strongest people aren't the ones who avoid the mirror. They are the ones who face it, who accept what they see, make peace with it, and change. But those who refuse, they become prisoners of their own reflection, haunted not by what others think of them, but by what they know about themselves. And that is the essence of karma, not fire and fury, not revenge served cold, but an unflinching reflection of everything they thought they buried, everything they thought they escaped, and no matter how fast they run, no matter how many people they convince, they will always meet themselves in the mirror. So if they seem agitated, restless, easily offended, look closer. That's not confidence, that's conflict. That's a person whose reflection won't let them sleep, who smiles too wide and laughs too hard because they're trying to drown out the echo of their own conscience. That's not strength, that's struggle, that's the sound of karma doing its quiet work, not in the world around them, but in the world within them. The mirror doesn't shout, it doesn't argue, it just waits. And when they finally have no one else to deceive, no more lies to tell, and no one left to blame, they'll see what's been waiting for them all along. Not revenge, not punishment, just the truth, and the truth, as always, is enough. The shift in the air at first, it's barely noticeable. A small pause in a conversation, a subtle delay in someone's response, a look that lingers a little too long with questions behind it. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's there, a shift in the air, something intangible that people can't explain, but they feel it. The energy around them begins to change, not because anyone said anything, not because of a single event, but because life, with all its invisible threads, starts to respond differently. It's the beginning of karma's quiet reply, not in thunderous punishment, but in invisible resistance. The things that once came easily begin to stall. The charm they relied on starts to lose its effect. The people they once manipulated with ease now feel guarded, distant, and they don't know why, or rather, they do know why. They just hoped it would never catch up with them. They believed their past wouldn't stain their present, but the truth is, every selfish action leaves a trace. Every betrayal changes something in the atmosphere, and eventually that energy comes back around, not as revenge but as consequence. It starts with a feeling, something's off, the laughter doesn't land the same, the room doesn't warm when they enter, people they once depended on are slower to answer their messages, doors that used to swing open now hesitate. Not because the world is cruel, but because the world remembers. It remembers how they treated others when they thought no one was watching. It remembers the promises they broke, the trust they shattered, the people they used as stepping stones. And now, without a single accusation, without a single confrontation, the world begins to respond accordingly. People feel it before they understand it, a gut instinct, a sense that something isn't safe, that this person may not be who they claim to be. And once that seed is planted, it grows fast. Reputations are fragile things, silent agreements held together by trust. And once that trust is gone, even if no one speaks it aloud, the shift begins. They try to overcompensate. They get louder, more animated, more charming, trying to recapture the control they once had. But it doesn't work anymore, because energy doesn't lie, and the energy they put into the world, the harm, the deceit, the manipulation, has now returned. Not with noise, with weight, with resistance, with friction in places where there used to be flow. This is what karma looks like when it arrives through atmosphere. It doesn't come as a single event. It comes as a pattern of things no longer aligning, people no longer connecting, opportunities no longer fitting, and the person experiencing it often can't put it into words. They'll say they're in a rut, that people are acting weird, that nothing seems to be going their way lately, but deep down they feel it, that they've stepped into the consequences they created long ago. The shift is subtle, but undeniable. They feel the room watching, not admiring. They feel the conversations growing shorter, not closer. They sense the temperature has dropped, even when no one has said a word, and they'll look for something to blame. A reason, a scapegoat, but they won't find one, because the reason lives in the past, in all the moments they thought didn't matter, in all the times they dismissed someone's pain or played innocent after causing harm. Those moments didn't disappear. They stored themselves in the air, and now the air has turned cold. That's karma, not as punishment but as memory. The world remembers even when it pretends to forget. And while others move on, find peace, build stronger lives, the one who caused harm begins to feel left behind, not through exile but through disconnection. They are not pushed away. They are simply no longer pulled in. People don't fight them. They just lose interest. They detach. They take longer to respond. They stop laughing as hard. They start to see through the facade. Because energy, like truth, has a way of revealing itself over time. And once the energy around a person shifts, it is nearly impossible to reverse without transformation. That's the difference between karma and punishment. Punishment is imposed. Karma is invited, through every choice, every word, every action. It's not delivered, it's reflected. The scariest part, the person living this may never admit it to anyone, but they know. They feel it in the pit of their stomach when plans fall apart, when invitations stop arriving, when old allies grow quiet. And they'll call it loneliness. They'll call it bad timing. But deep down they recognize the cause. They see it in the eyes of others, the growing distance. They hear it in the silence after their jokes. They feel it in the way the world no longer bends toward them. It's not that the world has turned cruel. It's that the illusion has shattered. The web they spun has unraveled, thread by thread. And now, standing in the ruins of their former power, they face a life where people no longer buy what they're selling. This is the shift in the air, the invisible justice that doesn't announce itself, but makes its presence felt. And it doesn't arrive with fury, it arrives with stillness, a stillness that exposes everything they tried to hide, a stillness that whispers, "This is what you built." No one has to say a word, the consequences speak for themselves. Not through rage, but through the quiet denial of warmth, the absence of connection, the loss of trust. That is karma, moving like wind through the spaces between people, seen only in its effects, but felt in its full power. So when they say nothing's working, or everyone's changed, understand what they're really saying is, the energy has caught up to me. What they're really feeling is the return of everything they put out into the world. And that return isn't punishment, it's the result of a life lived without care for balance. And now the scales are correcting, slowly, precisely, without drama. That's karma. That's the shift in the air. The lessons delivered through loss. There comes a moment in every life when loss arrives, not as a thief in the night, but as a messenger. It takes something, a relationship, a position, a reputation, a sense of certainty, and in that taking, it leaves behind something far more enduring, clarity. Loss has a language of its own. It doesn't speak in soft tones. It doesn't ask for permission. It simply enters, rearranges everything, and demands that you see. And often, the ones who have caused harm, the manipulators, the liars, the ones who thought they were untouchable, learn the deepest truths not through confrontation, but through absence, through silence, through watching something they thought they'd always have slip from their grasp, not because someone took it, but because life, in its quiet brilliance, simply removed it. And this is where karma truly takes root, not in punishment, but in reflection. Because when something valuable is lost, when loyalty walks out the door, when love no longer calls back, when trust becomes dust, there's no speech powerful enough to fill the silence that follows, no excuse that sounds believable in an empty room. And that's when the lesson begins. The spotlight they once basked in fades. The people who once defended them have grown tired, and now, in the aftermath, they're left with themselves, and the full weight of what they've done. The lesson isn't loud, it's not a screaming accusation, it's the slow, suffocating realization that something precious was broken, and they were the one who broke it, that what they lost was never theirs to own, but it was theirs to honor. And they failed. You see, karma doesn't always show up with fire and fury. Sometimes it walks in gently, hands them the bill for their choices and waits, because loss is a teacher that doesn't need to raise its voice. It simply removes what was once freely given, time, affection, opportunity, grace, and what's left behind is a space too wide to fill. That's the moment when the narrative they told themselves begins to collapse. The justifications, the stories they spun to protect their ego, the blame they cast on others, it all crumbles. Because when loss enters, it doesn't just take people or things. It takes illusions. It clears the fog. It demands accountability, and that's when they see it. What they had, what they misused, what they'll never get back. Some of them try to patch the holes. They reach out to the same people they once dismissed. They speak softer, act humbled, hoping that something might return. But life isn't on a loop. It doesn't rewind for convenience. When something is lost through betrayal or neglect, it doesn't come back the same, if it comes back at all. And that's the harshness of karma. It doesn't steal. It simply allows things to leave, and in that departure, it delivers the most powerful lesson of all, that people are not possessions, that loyalty, once broken, is rarely restored, that love, when mishandled, becomes silence, and that respect, once lost, has a long memory. But perhaps the most painful part of this lesson is not what they lose, it's what they see. They see how far they've drifted from who they once were. They see the faces of those who once looked at them with admiration now filled with disappointment. They see the contrast between what could have been and what now is. And that vision is cruel, not because it's false, but because it's true. They begin to realize that every choice mattered, every conversation, every betrayal, every moment they played the victim while secretly being the villain. It all led here, to this loss, to this quiet reckoning. And now, as they sit in the ruins of what they once controlled, they face the one truth they can't avoid. They did this. It doesn't happen all at once. Some resist it. Some blame circumstances. Some lash out one last time, hoping to regain control. But eventually, life stops responding, and that silence is louder than any argument. Because when you've burned bridges long enough, even the echo of footsteps disappears. The world doesn't come to punish. It simply moves on, and in that movement, in that great turning away, karma leaves its message. What you failed to value, you no longer get to keep. That is the justice. That is the weight. But here's the other truth, the part most people never talk about. The lesson delivered through loss is not only punishment, it's invitation, an invitation to change, to wake up, to become someone worthy of what they once had. And for those rare few who truly listen, who don't just suffer but transform, that loss becomes the beginning of something sacred. It becomes the turning point, the doorway to redemption, but for many, that invitation is ignored. Pride stands guard. Ego clings to its story. And so the cycle continues. Loss after loss, lesson after lesson, each one louder than the last, until one day, there is nothing left to lose but themselves. You see, loss is not the enemy, it's the mirror. It shows what words cannot. It reveals what denial hides, and though it hurts, deeply, thoroughly, often beyond measure, it also heals. Because in the space that loss creates, truth finally has room to breathe. And in that truth there is potential, not for repair, but for rebirth. But that rebirth only comes to those who stop blaming, stop running, and start listening, because every loss carries a message, and karma. Karma doesn't just deliver the pain, it delivers the message with the pain. And if that message is ignored, the losses continue. Until finally the lesson is learned, not through theory, not through talk, but through the lived reality of watching everything slip through your fingers and realizing you were the one who let it go. So when loss arrives, let it speak, let it reveal, let it strip away everything that was built on falsehoods and control, because that's where the lesson lives, not in the pain, but in the space after the pain. That space where honesty finally breathes, that space where transformation becomes possible, that space where karma whispers, now you know. What will you do with it? They're already living the consequences. You don't need to wait. You don't need to wish. You don't even need to hope that one day the people who wronged you will finally get what they deserve, because truthfully, they already have. They're not living freely, no matter how it looks. They're not smiling with peace, even if their photos suggest it. You might think they escaped the fire, walked away unscathed, moved on, while you were left to pick up the pieces. But the real punishment doesn't happen in public. It unfolds quietly, behind closed doors, in moments that no camera can catch and no social feed can expose. The people who caused damage, who betrayed you, manipulated, lied, discarded your kindness like it was disposable. They're not thriving in the way they want you to believe. They are surviving in the mess they created, and every single day they are haunted not by you, but by themselves, because that's the greatest weight karma carries. It doesn't have to show up wearing chains or shouting justice from the rooftops. Karma simply allows a person to live inside the reality they built. It lets them sit in the very house they constructed from arrogance, selfishness, and deceit. And while it may look impressive from the outside, it's hollow within. There is no peace where peace was never planted. There is no joy in a life stitched together with manipulation. And eventually the very tactics they use to harm others become the traps they fall into. Their mind becomes the courtroom, their guilt becomes the sentence. Their silence becomes the echo chamber that never lets them forget. And so, while you're healing, rebuilding, learning, loving again, they're stuck in a loop of their own making, pretending everything's fine while knowing, deep down, that nothing is. You see, the consequence of harming good people isn't just in what life takes from you. It's in what life no longer allows you to feel. They might have the things, the house, the job, the company of people who don't yet see the truth. But joy, genuine connection, inner rest, that's something no amount of performance can recreate. They may laugh loudly, but listen closely. There's no warmth in it. They may post their victories, but notice how hollow they feel. Because when a person lives in a way that requires them to constantly defend, deceive, or manipulate just to maintain control, they are never truly free, and that's the prison they live in now, not built by iron bars, but by emotional consequences that never let them breathe fully again. There's a reason their relationships start to fail, a reason they keep attracting people just like themselves, a reason they never stay long in one place, or one friendship, or one moment of stillness. It's because they've become the source of their own unrest. They don't trust anyone, not because others are untrustworthy, but because they remember what they did to someone who trusted them. And so, every new bond is clouded with suspicion. Every compliment feels like a setup. Every act of kindness is questioned. That's the cost of breaking good things. You stop believing good things can exist. They're not waiting for karma to arrive. They are already inside it. And you, the one they hurt, you've moved on more than you realize, because if you've felt pain and still chosen to heal, if you've been broken and still chosen to build, then you've already stepped into freedom. The real victory is not watching them fall, it's watching yourself rise. Karma was never about revenge, it's about balance. And when someone takes from others dishonestly, life eventually takes from them what can't be replaced: peace of mind, depth in connection, and the ability to feel whole. No one needs to teach them a lesson, because life in its quiet authority already is. Every time they sit with someone new and feel hollow, every time they lie awake at night, wondering why nothing feels meaningful, every time they try to outrun the past, but it shows up in a new disguise, that is karma, not as fire but as emptiness. You don't need to send a message. You don't need to correct the narrative. The truth has a way of surviving every lie. The people they deceived will eventually see it. The charm they used will lose its shine, and the web they spun will collapse under its own weight. You've already been set free, maybe not immediately, maybe not without tears, but freedom isn't loud, it's steady. It's found in waking up and not carrying the bitterness, in laughing without guilt, in no longer needing closure from someone who was never honest to begin with. That's what they'll never understand, that while they were trying to win control, you were learning how to live. And now, while they fake smiles and chase illusions, you've built something real. Their punishment is not some distant moment of exposure. It's this, knowing they had something pure, something sincere, something safe, and they chose to ruin it. They can't fix that, not with apologies, not with explanations, because some losses are not just about losing someone, they're about losing access to something rare. And once that door is closed, it doesn't open again, not because of vengeance, but because of growth. You've outgrown the chaos, the pain, the false promises, and you've stepped into a version of yourself that won't allow that kind of treatment again. That's the true consequence for them, not that they lost you, but that you'll never look back, so don't envy their life. Don't measure your healing by their pretending. Don't wish for karma to strike louder, because it's already speaking, in ways no one can see, in the look in their eyes when no one's watching, in the emptiness that success can't fill, in the fear that someone, somewhere, will finally see who they really are. That's the price of betrayal, not the backlash, but the absence of real connection. That is what karma looks like in its most merciful form, not as vengeance, but as consequence, not as destruction, but as decay from within. And it's already happening.